You have $3,200,000. You are standing in aisle 7 of a Meijer on a Tuesday afternoon, 2:40 p.m., holding a $4.29 bag of pretzels, checking the unit price against the store brand 2 shelves down. You drive a 2010 Hyundai Elantra with 187,000 miles on it, parked under the second light pole from the entrance, the one that flickers every third blink. You are 47 years old. Nobody in this store knows what you're worth. Not the cashier. Not the man loading rock salt into his cart 3 feet away. You put the store brand pretzels back and take the $4.29 bag anyway, because your kid likes that one, and you close the gap in your head before you even reach the register. That's the whole scene. That's the hook. Nothing else happens. You've been a plumber for 26 years. You started at 21, apprenticing under a man named Gary who smoked in the van and never once said good job in 4 years of Tuesdays. You have a work van, a 2014 Ford Transit with your business name on the side in vinyl letters that are starting to peel at the corner near the wheel well, and you have the Elantra, which is yours, which you bought used in 2015 for $9,400 cash from a guy in Fort Wayne who was moving to Arizona. You still drive it. You still change the oil yourself in the driveway every 5,000 miles, on a Saturday morning, with a $12 filter wrench you've had since 2011. Your house is a 3-bedroom ranch on a quarter-acre you bought in 2009 for $3,200,000. It is paid off. You paid the last payment in March of 2021 and didn't tell anyone, not your neighbors, not your brother, not the guys at the supply house where you buy your PVC fittings. Your job is unclogging toilets, snaking drains, replacing water heaters at 6 a.m. before people leave for work, and crawling under houses in July when the crawl space hits 104 degrees. People call you just a plumber. You've heard it said about you at a barbecue, from across a fence, by someone who didn't know you were standing close enough to hear it. You didn't correct anyone. You went back to your paper plate of potato salad and let it go. Here is why you hide it. It isn't shame. It isn't modesty either, not really. Modesty is a performance, and you don't have the energy for performances after a 10-hour day with your knees in a crawl space. It's simpler than that. The moment people know what you have, the relationship changes. You watched it happen to a guy you knew, a roofer named Dale, who sold his company for $1.4 million in 2017 and told everyone at the Elks Lodge within a month. By that Christmas, Dale had 2 cousins asking for loans, a nephew who suddenly wanted to talk business ideas over coffee, and a version of himself in every conversation that wasn't really him anymore, it was the number. People stopped asking Dale how he was doing and started asking Dale what he was going to do with it. You decided, somewhere around year 11 or 12 of your own numbers quietly climbing, that you were not going to be Dale. You were going to be the plumber in the Hyundai. The version of you that people already knew was going to stay intact, because that version got invited to things, got trusted, got treated like a neighbor instead of a number. Money, for you, was never about the number on the statement. It was about the phone not ringing. Not literally, your work phone rings all day, that's the business, but the other kind of ringing. The kind where a bill shows up and your stomach drops before you even open the envelope. You remember that feeling specifically, from 2004, when your daughter needed a $340 dental procedure and you had $290 in the checking account and had to ask your father-in-law for the difference, and the way he handed you $200 without a word but with a look that stayed with you for years. You built the $3,200,000 so that look never happens to you again, and so it never happens to your kid, either. Freedom, in your accounting, is not a yacht. Freedom is opening a bill on the kitchen counter, at whatever hour it arrives, and feeling nothing. No spike. No drop. Just numbers on paper that you can pay without moving anything around. You have never once, in 11 years, said the phrase "I can afford that" out loud to another person, because saying it out loud is how the version of you that people trust starts to disappear. There's a second layer under the first one, and it's the one you think about more at 47 than you did at 35. It's not just privacy. It's that the identity of plumber is one you actually like. You like the smell of flux paste. You like the sound a drain makes when it finally breaks loose after 20 minutes of cabling. You like being handed a cup of bad coffee by an 80-year-old widow named Carol on Maple Street who has used your company for 11 years and calls you by your first name and has no idea, none, that the person fixing her garbage disposal owns more in index funds than her house is worth. If Carol knew, something would shift between you, some invisible tax would get applied to the relationship, and you have decided that tax isn't worth paying. Being just a plumber isn't an insult you're quietly seething about. It's a disguise you built on purpose, plank by plank, over 2.5 decades, and you maintain it the way you maintain a truck regularly, without drama, because the alternative is worse. The system that got you here was never a plan. Nobody sits you down at 21 with a whiteboard. What happened instead was a sequence of boring decisions, made mostly on Tuesdays, none of which felt like anything at the time. In 1999, your very first year running calls solo after Derry let you go out on your own, you opened a Roth IRA at a credit union in Elkhart because a customer, an accountant named Warren, whose water heater you replaced on a Thursday in October, mentioned it while you worked, almost as an aside, the way people mention things they don't realize are worth $3,200,000 someday. You put in $2,000 that first year. Not because you understood compounding. Because Warren said just do it and forget about it, and you were 22 and did what an accountant told you to do while he watched you sweat copper joints in his basement. You forgot about it. That's the whole system, really. If you had to compress 26 years into one sentence, you forgot about it, on purpose, over and over, for a very long time. You automated $150 a week out of your checking account into that Roth before automated transfers were even something most people your age understood. Then $200. Then, once the business had 2 trucks and an employee named Miguel who's still with you today, $400 a week into a taxable brokerage account at a discount broker, split almost entirely into 2 total market index funds, rebalanced once a year, every January, on the same Saturday you did your taxes. You never picked individual stocks except once, in 2011, when you put $3,000 into a company because a customer recommended it, and you lost most of it within 18 months, and that failure taught you more than any success could have. It taught you to stop thinking you were smarter than the market, and go back to the boring index funds and never touch them again. The real engine wasn't the investing. It was the business. By 2013 you had 2 vans, 3 employees, and a decision in front of you: buy a bigger truck and a nicer sign, the way most contractors do to look successful, or buy a small rental duplex on the west side of town for $61,000 that needed a new roof and 2 water heaters, which you installed yourself, for the cost of parts. You bought the duplex. You still own it. It's been rented continuously since 2014, cash flowing $410 a month after everything, and it's worth roughly $3,200,000 today. Nobody who drives past that duplex knows you own it. The tenant thinks the property manager, a woman named Patricia who takes 8% and handles the calls, is the owner. You've kept it that way on purpose. You maxed S&P IRA for the business starting in 2016, once the income supported it, funneling in as much as $40,000 to $50,000 in some years, pre-tax, growing untouched. You kept your personal spending almost flat for over a decade, the same modest raises to the grocery budget, the same one family vacation a year, usually a rented cabin 4 hours away rather than a flight anywhere, because flights make everything feel bigger than it needs to be. Every dollar that didn't need to be spent went into the same 2 index funds, the same rhythm, the same boring Saturday in January. There was no secret vehicle. No trick. Just 26 years of not spending money that most people your income bracket would have spent, funneled into accounts you didn't check more than 4 times a year, compounding in a way that felt like nothing was happening for a very long time. Year 1 looked like almost nothing. In 1999 your net worth, if you'd bothered to calculate it, which you didn't, was somewhere around negative $4,000, student loan adjacent debt from a trade school certification, a used truck loan, first and last month's rent on a 1-bedroom above a laundromat on Prairie Street. You worked 6 days a week. Sundays you slept until 10 and then did paperwork at the kitchen table with a calculator and a legal pad, because you didn't trust software yet and wouldn't for another 6 years. Your first winter solo, January 2000, You had 11 service calls in 3 weeks because a competitor undercut you on a bid for the trailer park on the edge of town, and you sat in the Transit, the old one, not the current one, outside a Speedway gas station at 9 p.m. doing math on a receipt, wondering if you'd made a mistake going out on your own. You didn't quit. You dropped your rates by $8 an hour for 90 days, just to keep the calendar full, and you ate the difference out of pride and fear in roughly equal measure. Your girlfriend at the time, who became your spouse in 2002, worked at a dental office and covered the health insurance for both of you because your trade didn't offer any, and private plans were $340 a month you didn't have. You remember a specific Tuesday in February 2000, cold enough that a customer's pipes had frozen and split behind a wall, and you spent 4 hours on your back in a crawl space that had a thin skin of ice on the dirt floor, and you made $260 for the day, and you drove home and ate a can of soup standing at the counter because you were too tired to sit down, and you put $40 of that $260 into the Roth IRA before you did anything else with it. Not $200. $40. That was the whole deposit. It felt like nothing. There were doubts that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with respect. A customer in April of 2000, a man in a golf polo standing in his own driveway, called you the drain guy to his wife within your hearing, not unkindly, just carelessly, the way you'd refer to a lawn service. You didn't say anything. You finished the job, invoiced $185, and drove to the next call. You started keeping a small notebook that year, not a budget, a different kind of ledger where you wrote down every account balance on the first of the month. January 2000, $612 across 2 accounts. By December, $1,940. It wasn't a milestone anyone would clap for. It was a number that told you the 12 months hadn't been wasted, even though every single day inside them had felt identical to the one before it. The first real milestone came in October 2001, almost 2 years in, when your combined savings crossed $10,000 for the first time in your life. You didn't celebrate. You remember exactly where you were, standing in your own kitchen, the old apartment kitchen with the yellow linoleum, holding a printed statement, and feeling something closer to relief than excitement, relief that the last 2 years hadn't been for nothing, relief that the $40 deposits and the $8 an hour discount in the frozen crawl space had actually gone somewhere instead of evaporating. You folded the statement and put it in a drawer with your tax returns and went back to watching the Colts lose on a rented TV. That was the entire celebration. Nobody else in your life knew the number existed. You didn't tell your spouse the exact figure for another year, not out of secrecy from her specifically, but because you hadn't yet developed the habit of saying numbers out loud to anyone, a habit that would only get more entrenched as the number got bigger. By year 5, the account balances had stopped feeling like the result of individual $40 and $260 deposits and started feeling like their own weather system. In 2004, your combined investable assets crossed $3,200,000, and for the first time the growth in a single strong year, roughly $9,000, was larger than the total amount you contributed in year 1. That's the part nobody warns you about. The snowball doesn't announce itself. There's no month where a bell rings. There's just a Saturday in January 2005 where you're doing the annual rebalance and you notice the number moved more from the market than from your own paycheck, and you sit with that fact for a minute before going back to make coffee, because it doesn't change what Monday looks like. Monday still looks like a 6 a.m. water heater install in a stranger's garage. The life changes in year 5 were almost invisible to anyone watching from outside. You bought the duplex in 2013, technically closer to year 14 than year 5 if you're counting from 1999, but the internal shift, the one where you started thinking like an owner instead of a laborer, happened much earlier, closer to 2004 and 2005, when you hired your first employee, a 19-year-old named Cody, and realized your income no longer had a hard ceiling tied to your own 2 hands in a crawl space. You didn't move. You didn't buy a bigger house. You and your spouse looked at a house on Birchwood Lane in 2006, a 4-bedroom with a pool, and walked through it on an open house Sunday, and drove home in silence, and neither of you brought it up again. The mortgage on that house would have been $1,900 a month. You were paying $740. The difference, invested instead of spent, is a meaningful chunk of what became the $3,200,000 2 decades later. Though you didn't do that math in 2006, you just felt, in your gut, standing in that empty poolhouse kitchen, that the whole thing was a costume you didn't want to wear. Internally, something else shifted around year 5 that had nothing to do with dollars. You stopped being afraid of the phone. Not the work phone, the other one. Bills stopped producing the stomach drop. You noticed it first with a $1,100 transmission repair on the old Transit in 2005, an expense that would have wrecked your month in 2000, and instead you just paid it and moved on with your Tuesday, and it took you until Thursday of that same week to even register that you hadn't panicked. That was the real milestone of year 5. Not a number. A missing feeling. Your neighbors, meanwhile, saw exactly what they'd always seen: a plumber's van in the driveway, a modest ranch house, a family that took one vacation a year to a lake 4 hours north. Nothing about the outside changed at all, which was, by that point, entirely the point. By year 10, in 2009, the combined accounts crossed $3,200,000 and you bought the house you're still in, the ranch, $3,200,000, the one you'd pay off 12 years later without telling anyone. You remember the closing specifically, a Thursday afternoon in a title office that smelled like burnt coffee, a stack of papers you signed 41 times, and a closing agent named Sandra who asked what you did for work and, when you said plumber, didn't ask a single follow-up question, because there was nothing about the transaction that suggested she should. You drove home in the Transit, not the Elantra. You didn't have the Elantra yet in 2009, and picked up a pizza on the way, the same $11.99 large pepperoni you'd been getting from the same shop since 1999, and ate it at the new kitchen counter sitting on an overturned bucket because the table hadn't arrived yet. The number kept climbing after that, in the way numbers climb when you stop watching them closely, through the 2008 crash, which you rode out without selling a single share, mostly because you were too busy running calls to check the balance more than once that whole year. And it turned out not checking was the best possible strategy you could have accidentally stumbled into. Through 2015, when the Elantra came into the picture for $9,400 cash. Through 2020, when service calls dropped for 6 weeks and then came back louder than ever because everyone was suddenly home noticing every drip and gurgle in their own house. Through 2021, the year you made the final mortgage payment on the ranch and didn't mention it to a single person, not even your spouse, until she found the paid-off letter in the mail and asked why you hadn't said anything, and you didn't have a good answer beyond it didn't feel like something to announce. Today the number sits at $3,200,000, spread across the Roth, the SIPI, the taxable brokerage, the paid-off house, and the duplex on the west side that Patricia still manages without knowing who signs her checks each month. You still drive the Elantra, 187,000 miles now, the check engine light having come on and gone off again 3 times this year for reasons you haven't bothered to chase down. You still order the same black coffee, no room, at the gas station on Route 6 every morning at 5:50 before your first call, and the girl at the counter, whose name is Brianna, still rings you up the same $2.19 she's rung you up for 4 years without knowing anything about your accounts. Carol on Maple Street still calls you by your first name and still has no idea. You are 47 years old, and you are still, to nearly everyone who knows you, just a plumber. That's not a wound anymore. That's the whole design working exactly the way you built it. If this story resonated with you, subscribe. I post a new story every single day. If you want to start investing today, the Robinhood link is in the description. It comes with a free stock. And if you want the weekly letter, the Quiet Wealth letter, that link is there too. See you tomorrow.